border to border, coast to coast. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on into another podcast by George. Happy New Year. That promo that I play, that border to border, coast to coast thing, that's gotten to be a little bit of a trite phrase today, but it comes from my days in radio. When I was on the Clerk Channel Voice of the Midwest, WHO. It was a big deal back then when I used to do the news. And so that's why it's in there. And, you know, the year end, I was never a big retrospective year-end kind of guy, those historical pieces. I always told people in the newsroom, you know, we do the news. We're not the History Channel. There's too much going on to spend a lot of time reflecting on, you know, the year past. Let's get with it. Let's get on top of what's happening right now today. And we've got a guest that is all over that, folks. Let me click a button here and bring up the promo. I hope you saw this. It's Misty Winston, America's Jolt, you know, and I like to, you know, here's a wake up cup of coffee. This is where we're at in America, folks. We've got to wake up. I mean, if we don't change, change is going to come to us. The wolves of war are at the door of the United States of America. And Misty Winston knows this. She talks about it all the time. And here's her live line graphic. Let's do that. Misty Winston, she's an activist, a host whose work has been focused on press freedom, free speech, and anti-imperialism. And she's a host of the Misty Winston Show on TNT Radio that I've been fortunate enough to be on a couple of times, co-host of Action for Assange. And Misty describes herself as a cult leader, an Assangeist, and not for everyone. And okay, so why is she a cult leader? Why is she not for everyone? Because she's a truth seeker and a truth teller. And a lot of folks can't stand the truth, to quote that movie. And that's what she's all about. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I love her because she speaks the truth powerfully, quickly, succinctly, and in no uncertain terms. And now to go back to my days in radio, you know, I was the precursor to Rush Limbaugh. We used to really do news on the radio prior to that guy coming into vogue. And he spoke very slowly. I used to listen to him. God, this guy's not very good on the radio. He doesn't say very much. And it takes him a hell of a long time to say it. Why? Because his show was kind of for the dim-witted, kind of for the slow thinking, people that, you know, were slow on the uptake. So it fitted perfectly, and Rush Limbaugh led to Fox News, led to MSNBC and CNN, led to the mainstream media that we've got today. And I blame that guy for a lot of what's wrong with America. Okay, let me click this button here and bring this in and get her on, because her time is precious, and I love Misty Winston. Hi, Misty.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And I know the show is going to fly by, as it always does when Misty is on. And I wanted to start this way, which is a little different, because you wouldn't think I'd be starting a show with Misty Winston with an article by NPR. A lot of, you know, back in the day, it used to be okay, but then now it's called National Petroleum Radio, I think, because of their underwriters. But this is about Gaza. This is where I wanted to start today. Gaza health officials say Israel's offensive has now killed more than 20,000 people. My God. Misty, what I tell people right off the top here, we've become so callous. We've become so indoctrinated in the propaganda of the day that we don't get a visual. We don't get a sight. Think of your local theater, your high school gymnasium or something, with bodies stacked one on top of another, men, women, children, little bitty babies. 20,000 would overflow it. I mean, my God, the scope of this killing is unbelievable. Now, this article says Israel's devastating air and ground assault on Gaza has now killed more than 20,000 people in 10 weeks since the conflict began, according to Gaza's Ministry of Health, which a lot of people go, oh, Gaza's Ministry of Health. They're correct on their body. I have always been proven to be correct. So there's that. What else are they correct about? I think a lot. The ministry in the Hamas-run Gaza Strip said Friday that at least 20,057 people have died from the Israeli attacks since October 7th, and said 70% of those killed are women and children. Yeah, although the health ministry doesn't differentiate between civilian combatant deaths. It says the majority of those killed have been women and children. Another 50,000 people in Gaza have been wounded. The Hamas-controlled ministry says international aid groups generally agree with its tallies. And so let's bring this up on screen. This is from Misty's Twitter feed, and I'll put that address so you can follow her on Twitter up. But she says, I can't stop thinking of the disabled in Gaza, of which there are many, thanks to Israel intentionally taking out limbs for years, but also the blind, the deaf, the autistic, etc. I can't imagine. Yeah, this visual that I talk about, Misty, it's very difficult to get one. And people in this country that have never had to suffer through this, maybe since going back to the Civil War or something like that, we cannot understand this.
No, there's no, how could you possibly, right? I mean, even seeing it play out in front of us, it's impossible to be able to wrap your head around the scope of the situation. And yeah, I mean, listen, and the 20,000, I think that's probably an old number. I think that my friend Sarah Abdallah on Twitter tweeted out, and this is from the 27th. This is day 82 of the conflict, the genocide. And the numbers, this is from Euromed Human Rights Monitor, says 29,124 people have been killed. 11,422 of those have been children, kids, y'all. I mean, and this is, I think that, as you mentioned, the Gaza Health Ministry people, especially Joe Biden, like to try to pretend like their numbers are somehow not accurate or whatever. Historically speaking, they have been nothing but reliable. So that whole premise is ridiculous on its face. But I think, frankly, these numbers are underreported. I think that there are thousands of people buried underneath the rubble that we have no way to count for. Also, communication systems have been down for a very long time. And so different sections of Gaza and the West Bank too, we can't forget about the West Bank, they're unable to report to a central location to get accurate tallies. So I think that these are incredibly low. And we also need to mention that this, even those people, these are people who have mostly been killed by direct bombings, things like that. There are, this number is going to continue to rise at a rapid pace, especially as this continues, because there's going to be people dying of famine. There's going to be people dying of disease. We've seen that there are bodies decomposing in the streets. There is no clean water. There's very little food. There's, like one shower for like thousands of people. So it is a very dire situation. These numbers are going to continue to rise. And yeah, the tweet about the disabled, I have a child with autism. So I am, that's kind of, I kind of always think of those in those terms. And especially as a mother, trying to think of, my own child being in a situation like that. And especially with autism, the sensory overload of the bombs and the noise and the drones and the screaming and the crying. I cannot imagine my kid even attempting to manage that situation. And so, and yeah, I mean, the deaf, the blind, I can't fathom how horrifying and scary it would be to not be able to flee when you know that something is happening. But also, as you mentioned, Israel has been very purposefully taking out limbs of people, especially young men and boys, for a very long time. And so there are a lot of kids and young men running around with, one leg or no legs. And how do you flee when something happens?
Yeah, get up and run, get yourself out. Yeah, and Gaza is full of that. Now, I had not heard of that until I had Matthew Ho on my show, and I know you've had him on several times also. Yeah. Great guy. I mean, he knows whereof he speaks. He's the man with the bona fides, is the way I put it. And I saw that tweet by you, and I thought about the clip with him. I'll bring this up very quickly. Because everybody talks about the destruction. Everybody talks about the deaths, rightfully so. They don't talk about this dismemberment thing. Watch this. The number of injuries as opposed to deaths. What do you see when you look at this chart?
Well, that's a deliberate Israeli policy. What the Israelis have done for the better part of a decade, longer than that, really, I guess going back to 2008, is that they shoot to wound. They have specialized marksmen within their infantry, within their border police, who are armed oftentimes with a different type of rifle, with a different kind of bullet. Basically, the idea being is that they shoot. And they're trained, and they shoot the Palestinians in the leg in a particular spot. This past year, I've seen reports that they've been shooting them more often in the ankle. Other times it was in the shin, below the kneecap, in a way that makes it very difficult for the Palestinians to heal. And so that they are basically crippled for life.
So you do that to a population, and guess what? One day they bust out. They go through the gate. They run into Israel. As many as 1,500 reports vary, and how they died exactly certainly varies. But this tragedy was committed in Israel. Don't condone it. Understand it, given the circumstance in that clip and what Misty is talking about. And the point of it is, so much of this shit is couched in this religious magic thinking stuff coming out of Israel. And so I look at him and I wanted to say, Misty, well, dudes, I don't know if you've read the Old Testament or not, but this eye for an eye thing, well, okay. 1,200 people maybe were killed in that attack on Israel. God, we're going upwards of 20,000, 30,000 when they pull people out from the rubble now. This is an eye for a blood bucket full of eyeballs, Misty.
Yeah. Well, and we also need to mention that some of those 1,200 people were killed by IDF.
Yes.
And we don't know how many for sure. I would venture to say probably a majority of them, frankly. But also there's the whole rabbit hole you could go down that, listen, Gaza is one of the most surveilled locations on planet Earth. And so the idea that one of the most technologically advanced countries in Israel didn't know that this was coming, to me is unbelievable. I have a very hard time believing that Israel didn't know that this situation was coming. We know that Israel has funded and armed Hamas in the past. Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken about that openly. Many Israeli officials have spoken about that openly. So to me, it seems as if we need to have a conversation about whether or not this was allowed to happen, or in fact, if Israel helped it happen. I think that they have been looking for a reason to justify a genocide. I think that that's why we saw so much of the atrocity propaganda coming out, the 40 beheaded babies that didn't exist,
Yes.
the claims of mass rape that they've showed no evidence for, stuff like that. I think that they were looking for an excuse to slaughter Palestinians, and so they invented one. That's my opinion. Now, there's a lot of people who would disagree with that, but yeah, and the religious aspect of it is garbage. This has nothing to do with religion. The people who invented Zionism were atheists. This has nothing to do with religion. It is a power grab, as all war is. Smedley Butler told us that ages ago. It is about power, it's about land, it's about resources, it's about money. And it's not like they've ever been shy about speaking very openly about that. And not just in Israel, United States government officials, elected officials have very openly spoken about that in the past.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of comments and questions coming in for Misty. Now, I'll put the comments up on screen. If you got a question, I'll try to get that read back to Misty and get her perspective on these things. She mentioned those
Hopefully
beheaded
I have
babies.
answers.
Well, you got answers. The beheaded babies thing is a perfect example of what we're talking about here. Maybe a quintessential example. I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime, where the president of the United States would get up in front of a television audience and
lie.
relay stuff that was obviously, the first time I heard these claims, okay, this reminds me of the Russian bounties and the babies thrown out of incubator.
Babies.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
immediately.
That isn't real. Here he is. Let's go. Cue the Joe.
We're apologizing for our support.
Here it is. This is the 40.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever. Anyway.
Well, you didn't, Joe. You never thought you would, because you didn't, you liar.
Yeah, I know.
Fucking
I'm not a
disgusting.
Camelot guy anymore. That died with Kennedy. I don't know if it ever existed, but I still, the president of the United States, when he speaks, I pay attention. But that's an example of why you can't.
Yeah.
The world has changed, and Biden got up there and did that, and he can't be believed moving forward. And if you look at his history, I don't know if he could ever be believed. And speaking about that, now we're gonna talk about this Gaza situation. We're gonna talk about Julian Assange, because they're related in a lot of ways. Let me bring this up on screen to illustrate what I'm talking about. And Misty knows on my show I spend a lot of time talking about journalism and how every word means something. And okay, so look at this. This is from the USA Today. And I've highlighted I just want people to think when you read critically. Israel, troops not justified in shooting 3 hostages. Well, okay. Oh, God, what a headline. Okay, this highlighting is mine. Israeli troops who accidentally shot 3 militant held hostages. Okay, they accidentally shot 3 militant held hostages. Did not have open, or should not have opened fire, because the shooting did not match the risk weasel words, folks, they faced as a firefight unfolded, according to a conclusion issued Thursday by the Israeli military. The soldiers were not disciplined. Okay. Okay, next slide. This is kind of the shooting took place in Gaza less than 2 weeks ago, shocking Israel. No, it didn't. And fueling protests aimed at pressuring the government to make a deal with Hamas for the release of the remaining hostages. The shooting of the hostages should not have been carried out. God, do you think? The shooting did not match the risk and the situation. Chief of Staff Lieutenant Colonel Herzi Halevi wrote. However, it was carried out under complex circumstances and under intense combat conditions under prolonged threat. Now, right in the next paragraph, the three men were shirtless and had emerged from a building with a white flag when Israeli troops encountered them, and where the clashes between the military and the militants had taken place for several days. Okay, that was in the past. Two of the hostages were shot and killed immediately. Now, the third ran back into the building screaming for help in Hebrew. Misty, you can't make this stuff up. Honest to God, this is how we're. It reads like The Onion. I can't believe that the USA Today, its editors and writers, can put this down on paper and not look at those words and not know what they're doing. But I know you would say they know what they're doing. Yeah.
Of course they know. Are you joking? They are fully in on this. And in fact, they are essentially just regurgitating whatever Israel tells them to print. Israel has been in full control over the narrative in Western media for a very long time. And that is why I think it's so interesting to watch people be exposed to through social media and through, by the way, the unbelievably courageous journalism that is taking place in Gaza by journalists who know that they are being targeted. Over 100, I think it's 105 now in 83 days, journalists have been murdered. They know they're being targeted. Their families are being targeted, and yet they do their jobs. It is really something to watch. But yeah, I think, listen, USA Today knows, the New York Times knows, the Washington Post knows, they're all in on it. They all understand what they're doing. And this hostage situation, the idea that they're trying to, first of all, they investigated themselves and decided they did no wrong. I mean, where have we seen that before, right? Also, the IDF trains our cops. So, I mean, make the connection there. We see that happen all the time as well. But people need to be aware of something called the Hannibal Directive. Yeah. And the Hannibal Directive is something that is off the books now in Israel. But this is where essentially they decided that if any of their people were taken hostage, they would kill them on site to prevent an exchange situation like we just saw where Hamas took hostages and then they were able to exchange them for people who've been held in Palestine or in Israeli prisons in indefinite detention. Women, children, men, no charges, no nothing, under a completely different judicial system. And so Israel doesn't like that. And we see why, right? We've seen numerous people who were held hostage by Hamas who have said that they were treated well and who have said that their biggest fear was that the IDF would kill them. And this is why, because the IDF is killing their own people, not only just on October 7th, which we know for a fact has happened, but I think they have also been responsible for the deaths of many of their own hostages because they are indiscriminately bombing one of the most densely populated areas. And it's all of this is just such a farce. And I think that, but I do think that what's interesting is that a lot of people are now starting to see through it. And I think that's why we see millions of people in the streets all over the world.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk about that before too. I think you kind of feel on several different fronts, and hopefully on Julian Assange, that the worm is turning, so to speak, that things are changing a little bit. You have that sense with this as well.
Yeah, for sure. This even more so than Assange, in my opinion. I think that, as I mentioned previously, prior to this, I think even as far back as 2014, which is kind of the Great March of Return, there was social media, but I don't think that it was as prevalent as it is now. And I think that what we're seeing now is that people are in real time exposed to the reality of what's happening. They're not getting a whitewashed version of what Israel says. You know what I mean? As that article just said, the Israeli military says. That's the only story that we've ever really gotten before for so many people who didn't bother to look past the headlines and who didn't bother to research the actual history or any of the context. And so I think that what's happening now is that people are being exposed to the truth in a way that they never have been before. And I think that is, to me, that's, if there is, and there's really hard to find any hope whatsoever in this situation, seeing all of the death and destruction and devastation. But if there is any hope, it is that we are seeing people really being exposed to the truth in a way they never have before. And I think that is, to me, I think that Israel is losing the PR war. And I think that what that signifies is that there's no going back now. There's no going back to an open air concentration camp. There's no going back to an occupation. There's no going back to that. We're well past the point of no return there.
Yeah, where I get depressed is because I look at these people that they source, and I turn on mainstream media, and I'm not talking about Fox. I'm talking about CNN and MSM. Yeah. They put these people on, and they put these admirals on, these people that were wrong about Afghanistan. They were wrong about Iraq. They were wrong about Ukraine. They're wrong. They're being, like Misty says, they're now being proven wrong to be proven liars when it comes to the situation in Gaza. But they keep going back to them, which is the insult. And then the injury is they don't at least provide a countervailing view from the people that have been correct all along, the people on the left. Why wouldn't you just at random, once in a great while, as an example, throw on Misty Winston, who
they would never,
or somebody, or Jimmy Dore or Greenwald or any of these kind of people, put them on because they were correct. I mean, they've earned it by being correct about these things, and we never see that perspective. I know they don't.
It's about their donors. That's really all that they care about.
Let me see here. I want to bring this on in screen here. Okay, get this. A commander ordered troops to cease fire, but 2 soldiers who did not hear the order because of noise from a nearby tank shot the third person. Only later were the bodies confirmed to be those of 3 Israelis. And Havadi said that the commanders must make sure operational instructions are clear so that we don't kill ourselves.
Again Hannibal directive.
Yes, exactly. Which
they kill themselves all the time.
That is what the Hannibal directive is. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. This next one is a big one, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading this because this reminds me of Misty a lot. Yeah, this is from Caitlin Johnstone. I've tried to get her on my show. She was on Jimmy Dore once years ago, but she doesn't do it. Yeah,
I'm friends with her. She doesn't. Yeah. I've asked her to. She doesn't like to do a lot of interviews. It brings a lot of trolls her direction. She likes to kind of stay out of the public eye as much as humanly possible, which I respect. It's fine.
Well, and one of these stories I just read through, I think, made reference to this because they're going to tell you when it comes to this conflict in Gaza that it's complicated, that it goes back years, that you've got to be a historian and a real scholar to understand these things. And I read this from Caitlin, and it reminded me of you, Misty, because you were on my show, and you talked about how Caitlin told you once when it came to Assange. It ain't complicated.
It's not.
This is not complex at all. She says Israel is killing children at a historic rate, is killing an unprecedented number of journalists, and is starving 500,000 civilians while raining military explosives with USA written on the side of them, folks, on a giant concentration camp. No part of this is complicated. No part of this is two-sided. People like to say there's 2 sides to every issue. Yeah, so a right and a wrong. And there's
an occupier and there's the occupied. Yes. There's the oppressor and there's the oppressed. There's your 2 sides. And Kate's great at this. My brain is likes to make things more complicated than it needs to be. I have severe ADHD, so there's always like 9,000 thoughts happening in my brain at one time. And so sometimes it's hard for me to find clarity at certain points. And that's why I love Kate, because she is so good. And I say this all the time. She's so good at finding what's in my head that I'm struggling to verbalize or to get out into words. And she's so amazing at that. And she's absolutely right. There is the idea that, first of all, we need to stop. Can we please stop calling this a war? It is not a war. A war implies that there are 2 equal sides. This is one of the most technologically advanced militaries on planet Earth, and some guys with some like MacGyver made bombs. You know what I mean? Like they've like had to take some of the parts from some of the bombs that were sent to blow them up and reconfigure them to try to make weapons to fight back against an occupying power that has been there for 70 plus years. So it is not a war. It is a genocide. And it's very frustrating to me that anybody is trying to pretend as if there are equal sides here, or that this is complicated. This, to me, is one of the most cut and dry geopolitical situations I have ever seen in my lifetime. There's no gray space here. This is not hard. This is a genocide, period, end of story. It's one of the most clear-cut cases. And this is not just me saying this. This is numerous people who are way smarter than I am, who have said this, human rights lawyers, all different kinds of people who have said that this is one of the easiest and most cut and dry cases of genocide that they have ever seen. And again, Israel has not, I have a whole thread on Twitter where it goes through and shows different Israeli officials, their proxies, where they're openly talking about their intentions here. They've not ever been shy about it. So the idea that anybody's clutching their pearls over the use of the term genocide is just beyond frustrating to me. It's not complicated.
Yeah, let me bring this up on screen because I mentioned that I would try to get these questions and comments. And this is from Maple Marianne. She's a regular viewer of the show. She says, Misty, you're strong on camera. Give me hope. We have rallied, marched, petitioned to no avail. Mofo reps, folks afraid to pull out pitchforks. But maybe finally, next, these crimes are a pivotal point, it seems, beyond fucking useless elections. And I know you're big on that the change that we need is not going to come electorally.
No.
It's going to come through direct action, Misty.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Mary. First of all, thank you. That was very kind of you to say. I'm probably not the person for hope. I'm a very cynical person. I'm very self-aware about it. It's difficult for me to find hope in these situations. I do think that, again, if there is any hope to be found, it's the fact that I think that we are seeing millions of people be exposed to truths that they've never been exposed to before. I think there was somebody in the comments who said that Jay said, I've gone from an Israeli supporter for 40 years to disgust bordering on hatred today. And he's far from alone. There's lots of people. I've seen people on TikTok and Twitter and YouTube where they are talking about the fact that they are wrestling with the idea that they have been lied to so extensively on this issue for so long. Especially a lot of Jewish people are really, as they're seeing this play out, I think that a lot of Jewish people are disgusted that their religion has been co-opted and is now being used to commit the same atrocities that were used or committed against Jewish people. There's a lot of people, I think, who are really struggling to grapple with that. And I understand that, but we need you to come through to the other side and embrace the truth. It's tough. I get it. It's hard to admit that you've been lied to and admit that you fell for it. I mean, listen, that is a difficult thing to admit that you fell for that kind of propaganda, especially something as vile as this that's been used to do so much damage to so many people. But we need that. We need people to come on board. And yeah, I think, listen, direct action, if you know me, you know I talk about that all the time. You cannot vote your way out of this. You have to start challenging the system from outside. You have to start, creating parallel systems. You have to start opting out of certain situations, boycotting wherever you can, those types of things. And really just, I hate to be, cynical. That's me. I'm just going to be who I am.
I'm with you.
I think that we are living within the collapse of empire, and it is going to get incredibly bad for a lot of people. And so just prepare yourself the best you can. And recognize that whatever differences you have with your neighbors, you're going to need each other, because shit's going to get really, really bad before it gets better, in my opinion.
No, I agree with it. And I've seen a little bit of it. I got a taste of it during the Vietnam War. How did that change? How did that war end? It ended when it got really bad and touched the lives of a lot of Americans, and they got in the street and they stopped it. They're going to have to do the same thing. And that's why I started off this show talking about the wolves of war coming to our door, folks. Well, it's in the living room now, and it is going to get bad out there, but it's how change occurs in this country. And voting for the status quo, these two ridiculous and horrible political parties, is not going to change this, not in time to save us anyway.
No.
And I wanted to oh my
God.
Yeah, now this will get us to the Assange thing, and this is one of your tweets, and I don't know how you do it. In a lot of ways you're kind of impulsive, it seems to me like,
Yes.
but I love it. But in other ways you have the patience of Job to screw with these people and reply to their tweets and stuff. So this is from Blinken. He's got a Twitter account. He says, "This has been an extraordinarily dangerous year for press around the world. Remember now, upwards of 70, 100 journalists are murdered in Gaza. You want to know who's right? You want to know who's wrong? Who's killing journalists, folks? Many killed, many more wounded. I mean, this is the House of Mirrors. Again, this is like reading The Onion from Blinken. Many more wounded, hundreds detained, attacked, threatened, injured, simply for doing their jobs. I am profoundly grateful to the press for getting accurate, timely information to people. It's like, what in the hell are
I
you
can
talking
barely
about?
sit through reading
Yeah,
that. I can
yeah,
barely, it fills me with so much rage. And I'm going to apologize because this is probably where I'm going to rant because this
yeah.
pisses
Go
me
ahead.
off so much. The audacity of this shit stain to get
Yeah.
on Twitter and pretend like he gives one flying fuck about free press is so disgusting to me. And listen, I don't comment on Antony Blinken's tweets thinking that I'm going to change his mind. He's a psychopath. There is no way we're changing his mind. I comment on his tweets because there are people who are going to read through the comments and they are going to question, well, wait a minute. Yeah, she's right. What about Julian Assange? Or, hey, wait a minute. She's right. What about the 105 journalists who've been killed in Gaza with US made bombs? It's so, and listen, we deal with this all the time. Every World Press Freedom Day, every International Human Rights Day, all of those days, right? These absolute freaks like to get on Twitter and pontificate about how they care about human rights and they care about free press and they care about all this stuff. They do not. They are the biggest purveyors of violence on planet Earth. The United States is the largest terrorist organization on planet Earth. The United States kills more journalists than anybody on planet Earth. It is disgusting to me that this just absolute shit stain of a human being feels like he can get on Twitter and talk about this stuff without any pushback. And that's why I do it. I have absolutely zero respect for him or anybody else who does that. They are what's wrong with this world. And it is mind-blowing to me that anybody can read that and be like, oh yeah, Andy Blinken cares about journalists. No, he fucking doesn't. Free Assange. Shut the fuck up.
Well, and I tell people all the time, now I'm not a historian. Have I got books? Yeah, I don't fill my bookcase with books back here because I think that's ridiculous. People do that. I do understand modern history in particular. And when it comes to recent history in my lifetime, I know that pretty well. And this Antony Blinken guy, he was responsible, one of the main architects for the Iraq War, along with Joe Biden and all these people. And they're still administering death and dismemberment around the globe. My God, do we have to be hit up beside the head? And this is the value of Misty Winston because that's about what she does with her show and verbally and stuff. It's like how I started off this show. Wake up, people, because it's coming to our door. And the situation with Julian Assange, now this is a good little segue here. I want to get to that because I don't get to talk enough about Assange on my show because I could do just constant Assange stuff. Mm-hmm. This is from the LA Progressive, who I'm just starting to read. It says that the CIA loses its bid to throw out a lawsuit for violating rights of Julian Assange's visitors at the Ecuadorian embassy. Now, I'm not going to read all through this. This, in some respects, is not new. It's interesting, Misty, because a lot of people thought that this situation with Assange may get resolved legally in a court of law in the United States when they extradite him, and maybe not in Assange's favor. But there's another legal angle of this, and that's what this gets to. And this might be a game changer.
It's certainly going to be interesting. I don't know if it'll be a game changer. I have, again, cynical. But what I do think that it does is it exposes people. And of course, it's not getting talked about near enough. This lawsuit is not getting talked about near enough. Obviously, mainstream media will not touch it. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like many people in independent media are doing it either. I know Indie News Network did it. Obviously, they think they know they would have to deal with the wrath of Misty if they didn't. But there's been a couple people who have touched on it, but this lawsuit is significant. First of all, it's just for anybody who doesn't know, let me just kind of give you a little bit of context here. This is regarding UC Global. So when Julian Assange was in the Ecuadorian embassy, once there was a change of power in Ecuador, the president hired a security firm to provide security for the Ecuadorian embassy in London. That was very quickly co-opted by the CIA and essentially turned into a spying operation on Julian Assange and all of his visitors. So, and listen, this includes conversations with his legal team. Okay. So this alone, in my opinion, should see his case lit on fire and thrown out a window. The idea that they were spying on his conversations with his legal team is a gross violation of his rights. And this is also conversations with his doctors, journalists who came to visit him. And this is some of the most egregious spying that I've ever heard of. They had microphones on fire extinguishers. They had microphones in the women's bathroom because Julian Assange was paranoid and knew that he was being spied on. Everybody made fun of him, said that he was so paranoid. Turns out he was right again. They were spying on him. So he would have meetings with his legal team in the women's bathroom trying to avoid some of that. So they bugged the women's bathroom too. People who came to visit him had their electronic devices taken and cloned. They had their IDs photographed. All of their conversations were spied on. And so 4 of those people are now suing the CIA and Mike Pompeo, who was director of the CIA at the time. And it's been interesting. There's been a couple attempts by the CIA to have some of this stuff thrown out. That has been rebuffed.
Yeah.
So
let me stop you right there. I
yeah.
want to ask you about the thing that you just mentioned, because I talk about the house of mirrors that we live in on my show. And this is a perfect example with Julian Assange. Now, remember, he's accused of hacking, of spiriting away secret information from the United States that put lives at risk and all that shit, which is not true. But look what the United States did. They did take stuff.
Yes.
They did electronically surveil. They did the things that they're accusing Assange of. It's a projection. I mean, it's weird. Really, it is. Yeah.
That's what we do. Listen, if the United States makes an accusation against somebody else, it's just a confession. That's all that it is. I mean, we do that on a regular basis. Look at the way that we try to finger wag at Vladimir Putin for the way he treats journalists. Really? I mean, who do you think you are? You are the moral superior of no one. And so, yeah, I think that is, it's certainly interesting. It's not surprising. That is, again, that's our MO. But yes, this lawsuit, I think, is certainly going, I'm interested to see how it plays out. Again, very cynical. I have no hope whatsoever that there will be any actual justice through the court system. The court system is completely corrupted. We've seen that time and time again. But I think that what value it does add is that it exposes people once it gets talked about. I wish more people would talk about it. Maybe as it progresses and it gets a little bit more dramatic, maybe people will cover it more. But I think that it does just expose just the rank hypocrisy and unbelievable corruption that is taking place, and the way that this man's rights were violated so many times. I mean, in so many major ways. And this is just one of them.
And your cynicism is well placed when it comes to Assange. I'm looking for a way out. I'm thinking a technicality might be it. I remember, again, I'm talking about the Vietnam War and Watergate. You know, Nixon, he didn't get run out of Washington, D.C. on a helicopter because he invaded Cambodia and Laos and committed all those war crimes and all that. It was over a technicality with some break-in at a hotel and all this. That's how that's how the country works. Well, maybe Assange will get freed on that basis, because I hear people talk about him and this extradition process on whether or not he's going to come to the United States. And I look at it and say, well, yeah, if he stays in Belmarsh, the goal has been accomplished. He's been in prison basically for 12 or 13 years. If they can't kill him, that's what the United States wants: solitary confinement, the worst possible conditions for Assange. Belmarsh has been likened to a Guantanamo in London. If they bring him back here, he goes in front of a hanging judge and ends up in a secret super security prison cell. That's not a win either. I heard Matthew Ho on your show, and he kind of intimated, and I was thinking you were agreeing with him, maybe, that they're probably just fine with him remaining in Guantanamo, the United States, when it comes to this extradition process.
Yeah, I certainly have my theories on this. So in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, take it for what it is. I'm no expert. I have no insight into the legal situation. I'm not privy to those conversations. So I'm just an activist. But in my opinion, the United States does not want to bring Julian Assange here. In my opinion, I don't think that they want that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I think that opens, especially in an election year. No, they do not want that at all. That opens a huge Pandora's box. Not only does it open, it makes it incredibly difficult for mainstream media to continue to ignore that case. I think that if you're going to extradite a journalist to these shores and hold them in Alexandria Detention Center for pretrial detention, and then go through the rigmarole of a kangaroo court and the extradition court in the Eastern District of Virginia, and then convict that guy and send him to ADX Florence to be held in special administrative measures, that's good. They can't ignore that as well as they have been now. But it also, and I think that this is really the bigger issue, it opens up a conversation about what WikiLeaks exposed, because so far they've done a very good job of misdirecting the conversation onto Assange. Well, he's weird, and he's an asshole, and he smeared poop on the walls, and he was mean to his cat, and he's a hacker, and he's a rapist, and he's a traitor. That's my favorite one. He's not American. I would like somebody to explain to me how he can be a traitor. It always makes me giggle, but they've done a very good job of misdirecting the conversation to focusing on him as a human being rather than focusing on what WikiLeaks exposed. And I don't think they want to have those conversations. They don't want to, especially now as we're involved in a conflict in Ukraine with Russia. The Middle East is now on fire again. Taiwan's always been on the back burner. We've got stuff going on in Venezuela. There's stuff happening all over the place that if that conversation comes up and people are exposed to the unbelievable war crimes and massive corruption that took place in Iraq and Afghanistan, those conversations are going to lead to other conversations about other conflicts. They don't want that to happen. And so I think that, and listen, WikiLeaks exposed this themselves. Years ago, they released the Stratfor files, where there were conversations that were had in emails where they were trying to figure out how to deal with their Assange issue. And one of the ways that they discuss is what you just said. Well, we'll just tie him up in legal stuff for the next 25 years. That's exactly what they've been doing. I think that they would be more than happy to continue to keep him in Belmarsh. I think what we will likely see, there's the new court date in February. I think what we will likely see is they will continue to kick those cans down the road for as long as humanly possible. Maybe they'll, grant the appeal, then they'll be able to drag it out for a few more months, and then they'll have the appeal hearings, and then there will be something else that happens. For sure, they want to get through the election season without anything really happening. After that, I think that they would be quite satisfied to just let him die in prison. I think that that's really what they're hoping for. And he is dealing with a plethora of health issues. So that's certainly possible. But I really, in my opinion, I don't think they want to bring him here, especially not now.
When you look at this politically, is there any chance of this? I float this all the time and I kind of get shot down on it, but I think Biden is going to be swinging come election time with Trump or whoever the Republican candidate is, but particularly if it's Trump, he's going to need every single vote that he can get. He has no support now for anyone left of Rachel Maddow, probably. I mean, the left has abandoned him because of these circumstances that we've been talking about on this show. What if Biden got together with his advisors? I don't even know if he does that, if he's capable of it, but said, we didn't indict the dude. That was Trump, number one. Number two, he's been in jail basically for 12 or 15 years for what he did. That's good. That's what we wanted. We wanted to torture the guy. We wanted to have, and we've been doing that. And we need these votes from the left because we're swinging. So let's go ahead and let him out. Let's go ahead and free him. And we'll use that as a way to try to get some of these people left of Maddow to vote for us. Do you think there's any possibility of something like that? Or
Listen, first of all, there's a lot here. There's a lot. First of all, I'm not even entirely convinced that Joe Biden's going to be the actual nominee. I think that there's a very good chance that they pull him out last minute and say, oh, he's dealing with health issues. And then Nancy Pelosi will give a speech and tell, Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom to go win one for the Gipper, and AOC will cry and it'll be a whole thing. And it'll be somebody else who's the nominee and not Joe Biden. I don't think it's going to be Kamala Harris, but that's a whole other situation that they have to deal with. Now, is it possible that sure, anything's possible. Is it likely? Of course not. I don't think that they care who wins the election. I think, frankly, in my estimation, it looks like they're trying to help Trump win, trying to take him off the ballots and all of this stuff. All that does is further entrench his very loyal fan base and brings other people to him because they see that he is being attacked in that way. And so I said it on Twitter a while ago. It's almost as if they want him to win. And I wouldn't be surprised at all because Trump is good for them. Trump is great for them. First of all, Trump's great for the media. Trump is great for the military-industrial complex. People like to pretend like he's some outsider. He's not. He followed along with their entire agenda, basically word for word. I mean, he did what he was told to do. And so I don't think that, and also they were able to use him for something like the Assange case. Barack Obama did not want to arrest Julian Assange. Why? Because it messed with his legacy. He didn't want to be known as the guy that destroyed the First Amendment. Trump doesn't care. He's fine with that. I'll be the guy that destroys the First Amendment. What do I care? And so I think that they would love to be able to use him. And I think Joe Biden has already had an opportunity to kind of wash his hands of the situation when he was elected. Once you took office, you could have very easily said, this is something that happened under Donald Trump. It's a threat to the First Amendment. We need to end the situation now. He didn't do that. What he did was he backed off and he said, oh, it's in the courts. We got to just let it play out. We can't touch it. We just got to let it go through the court system. And so it's very unlikely that that's the situation. But again, we can change that with mass public pressure. As you said, that's the only thing we ever get anything done of substance in this country or in the world in general. So that's really what we need to focus on, is just getting as many people to make as much noise about it as possible.
Marianne Cummings. I love Marianne Cummings. She's Pretty sage, and she knows the political situation. She says word from the Illinois Democratic Party is that Fitzger will be put forward at the Democratic convention. Well, somebody, that's what Misty is getting at,
Yeah.
and not old Joe, because he looks like a guaranteed loser. But like Misty says, 6 of one, half dozen the other. I wanted to get at this angle because this is a little different on Assange, and it's from a strictly journalism point of view. I pride myself, or used to anyway, in being a journalist, working journalist. I've got a journalism degree. This is free, from the Freedom of the Press Foundation, and it reads as Julian Assange, a journalist. Here's why it doesn't matter. I read that. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Every time we talk about Julian Assange's prosecution, we hear the same thing from his critics. Assange is not a journalist. And Misty will tell you, Misty, you can jump in here anywhere. But my God, he's got awards and citations from every
Dozens.
journalism organization in the world. Yeah. And therefore, his case has nothing to do with press freedom. Now, this is a good way of describing this. They say sometimes it's because he did not contextualize the documents WikiLeaks published. Okay, I look at that, Misty, and I say, yeah, he did better. He just published them verbatim. He got them
source
out there.
documentation.
Yes, without
100%
yes.
verified, authenticated source documentation. Here's the truth in black and white. You read it and you decide.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is the best form of journalism in a lot of respects. If you've got people that are smart enough to read it and understand it, which there are, and they were, and they still are, most notably present company, Misty Winston. Sometimes I say it's because he didn't contextualize the stuff, or because they think he's a hacker. Other times it's because of unsubstantiated claims. The disclosures put American lives at risk. Still other times it's due to allegations that years after events at issue in Assange's indictment, he collaborated with Russia to help Donald Trump get elected. My God, people, you don't believe something that stupid. I mean,
there's zero evidence to support. I need to speak on that because that still gets brought up on a regular basis. There is zero evidence to support that claim, period. And in fact, Julian Assange did an interview. I think it was with maybe Rick Sanchez. I don't remember. I forget who it was. I'm sorry. Whoever it is, I'm sorry. But he did an interview with somebody where and listen, Julian Assange is not somebody who speaks about sources ever, period, end of story. He doesn't mention them. He doesn't allude to them in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But the idea that he said very clearly, our source on this was not the state of Russia. It was not a state actor, period, end of story. And people will be like, oh, well, do you trust him? Hell yes, I do. Are you joking me? Yeah. WikiLeaks has a 100% record of accuracy, which Julian Assange is very proud of. And I think holds that very close to his heart. I don't think there's any way whatsoever that he would risk that by lying when he doesn't have to. He could have just said, we don't discuss our sources, period. He didn't have to make any kind of specific statement whatsoever. So yes, I trust him when he says it was not a state actor. There's zero evidence to support the fact that he worked with Russia in any way, shape, form, or fashion, or worked to get Donald Trump elected. A lot of people say, well, he didn't tweet or he didn't publish things about Donald Trump. Well, if he would have had stuff about Donald Trump, he would have published it. That's what he does. And if he were, here's the thing. People say, well, he published the stuff about Hillary Clinton, which damaged her. If he didn't publish it, then what then he's helping her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
His job as a journalist is to get, when he receives information within the public interest and he is able to verify its authenticity, it's to publish it, period. It's not to gauge, oh, who does this hurt? Who does this help? What's this going to mean in the greater scheme of things? I'm a journalist. This is information in the public interest. We verified that it's legit. I'm publishing it. That's it. That's as simple as that, period.
Yeah. Nothing but the truth. Never had to retract anything. Let's assume all of that is true. It's not. None of it's relevant under the main law being used to prosecute him, the Espionage Act. Here's why the Assange prosecution endangers of press freedom and puts all journalists at risk. All journalists at risk. And why in the hell they're not coming to, I mean, they give tepid little bitty weak support and they have a column once every, 2 years or something like that. Why in the hell aren't they jumping up and down about this? The charges are about news gathering, not Russia, Trump, and the DNC. First, we should get this out of the way. Assange's indictment has absolutely nothing to do with the 2016 election, as Misty said. The words Russia, Trump, Clinton, and the 2016 election are never mentioned. The Espionage Act charges against Assange are entirely about his obtaining and publishing documents in 2010, more than 6 years earlier, from whistleblower Chelsea Manning. Now, those documents include war logs from Afghanistan and Iraq, State Department cables, and files on Guantanamo Bay prisoners. All true, folks. The government decided against indicting Assange in connection with the 2016 publication of DNC emails due to a lack of evidence.
Like
themselves.
I just said.
Yeah.
Like
They
I
gave
just
up
said.
the, yeah. 94% of the charges are about acts of journalism, not hacking. So what they're saying here is in those indictments, 94%, just as a starting point, of the charges are not legit because they are against the First Amendment in this country. We're the ones that charging him. 94% of them can't do that. The Justice Department and Assange's critics have been taking great pains to portray Assange as a hacker rather than a journalist. Here's what they usually leave out. The Espionage Act counts where our 17 out of the 18 charges in the indictment have nothing to do with hacking or conspiracy to hack anything. The government does not allege in those charges that Assange helped Manning hack any of the documents Manning sent to WikiLeaks. Instead, they accuse him of speaking with Manning over encrypted channels. Okay, here comes the punchline, so to speak. Asking her questions, convincing her to give him documents, receiving documents, holding on to them, and then publishing these documents.
Journalism.
Which is, in other words, acts journalists engage in every day. That's what they do.
It's because he's a journalist.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You want more proof? Yeah, there you go. It's charges against routine news gathering. So I don't know. We can go on and on about this, Misty, but I guess my question for you, and we've talked about this before, and you mentioned how that one allegation about the Russians and the 2016 election and all that continues to come.
So stupid.
Yeah. Is that probably the primary thing that you see rearing its ugly head most frequently, or something else?
I would say, yeah, that's pretty prevalent. I would say I also get the traitor thing a lot, which it makes me laugh. So y'all, he's Australian. He cannot possibly be a traitor to the United States. He owes zero allegiance to the United States of America, none whatsoever. And we also need to mention too that the one charge that is not the 94% that you just discussed there is a computer intrusion charge, which again has nothing to do with helping Chelsea Manning hack, with any of that stuff. Essentially, what they did is they got a source called Siggy Thordarson, who is a convicted pedophile, a diagnosed sociopath, a career criminal. In fact, he was convicted of taking money from WikiLeaks in Iceland. I think he's currently in jail in Iceland, but they gave him immunity to essentially lie so that they could create this charge because they knew that they didn't have anything. And so this charge came, it was called a superseding indictment. So there was already the indictment. This was a superseding indictment where they knew that they had no case. So they used this Siggy guy in order to, and Siggy Thordarson was a low-level WikiLeaks volunteer. He wasn't really all that affiliated with Julian Assange. He really had no connections or anything like that. But they just used him to lie, to manufacture evidence, to manufacture testimony against Julian Assange, which, by the way, Siggy Thordarson has since come out and admitted that all of that was a lie. And it brought proof too. He brought transcripts, he brought text messages and emails and all of that stuff. You can check that out. I don't know if it's still called, I think it's STUNDIN. I'm not sure if it's still called that or not. Every time I look it up, it comes up under a different name. But if you just Google maybe Assange testimony fabricated or something like that, I'm sure it will come up. I can tweet out the link. It's a huge article, massive article. These journalists spent a significant amount of time with Siggy and went through the whole thing. And so they essentially just used fabricated testimony in order to get this one charge against him so that they could continue the prosecution. That's it. And it's all bogus. It's all ridiculous and made up. And it had to do with hacking into Iceland politicians' emails and all of that stuff, which never happened. So they have nothing on Julian Assange. And there is no question whatsoever that Julian Assange is a journalist, period. It is absurd that anybody tries to pretend otherwise.
And if you care about the truth, if you care about knowing the truth, and that's what that freedom of the press article gets to. Really, you've got to be concerned about Assange, maybe more than anything, because
Yes.
of the slippery slope. Now, back in the day, back in the dark ages, when I was in journalism school, they were all talking about New York Times versus Sullivan and the libel law situation. And the point was, hey, you can't go down that slippery slope. You can't allow this type of libel legislation to succeed, because if you do, it'll have a huge chilling effect on journalism. Journalists will be afraid to publish. Well, look at what Assange is doing. This case, I tell people that we're not talking about a chilling effect here. We're talking about frozen ground. And I guess that
the
kind
end of truth. I know that sounds very dramatic, but it's the end of truth. They're criminalizing the truth.
Is it somewhat because of where we are right now already? I wonder whether or not the Assange case, because I look at these articles and we've gone through some of them. How can they be that dumb? And Misty tells us they're not. They're not. They're in on it. But are they more willingly in on it because they're afraid to not be in on it because of what happened to Julian Assange?
Yes, 100%. Listen, mission accomplished. And not only have they created an unbelievable chilling effect across journalism, they've also created an unbelievable chilling effect against whistleblowers. And again, they are straight up criminalizing the truth, period. That is what's happening here. And that's why, as you said, you should care about this maybe more than anything else. And I understand that there's a lot of really awful stuff going on in the world right now. You can't fight for Palestine if you cannot speak the truth.
Yes.
You cannot fight against war if you cannot speak the truth. You can't fight for the environment or education or whatever it is that you care about. You can't do it if you cannot speak openly, if you cannot educate yourself and others, if you do not have access to the truthful information, if you can't engage in dialogue and debate, if you can't openly express your opinion. And that is what is at stake here. And I think that, and I realize that I get really fired up about it. People say I'm overly dramatic. I don't think I'm dramatic enough, y'all.
Yeah.
This is literally a turning point in human history. If Julian Assange is allowed to be extradited and brought to this country and they criminalize journalism and truth telling, it is game over for the First Amendment. It's game over for free speech. It's game over for all of that. And it is, which means you then cannot be an effective advocate for anything that you care about. It is over. They want full control over the narrative. The United States is seeking global jurisdiction over information and journalism. If that doesn't fucking terrify you, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong in your head. That is what is at stake here. And I realize that people will say, well, oh, he's just one guy. Yeah, he's just one guy. It's not about him. This isn't about him. Is his life worth fighting for? Is what's happening to him as a human being atrocious? Should we all be against it? Of course. But it's not about him. It's not about Julian Assange, the man. It is obviously he has a family and all of that stuff. And I'm not trying to diminish his humanity, but this is so much bigger than that. And it's not just about, as you mentioned, it's not just about they can come for any of us. They define what, as you've seen, they define what journalism is and who is a journalist. Do you have a tweet that they don't like? Do you have a blog? Do you have a Substack that maybe criticizes the American empire? They can come for you too, just as easily as they're coming for Assange. This is about all of us. It's about all of us, our right to know, our right to hold power to account. So much is at stake here. And I realize that I can get a little preachy and things like that, but it's so frustrating to me that this has been going on for so long and people just do not understand and do not get how this impacts them. And I get it. Freedom of speech and press freedom is very abstract. It's not something that hits you in the face every day. It's not like, hey, I can't feed my kids, or hey, I can't afford to go to the doctor. Oh shit, my car broke down. I can't afford to fix it. I realize that people have a lot going on, but if we lose this, it's bad. This is a game changer, in my opinion.
They don't call it the First Amendment for nothing. I mean, we're talking about the very essence of this country. And if you don't know how important it is, think back to that clip that I played. If we don't have Julian Assange, if we don't have journalists revealing the truth, particularly on the left, like we have here recently, you're going to be sitting at home in front of your television watching the president of the United States talk about 40 babies being beheaded by Hamas and taking the country to world war. I mean, that's how serious we're talking about. Well, we're out of time. We're going to lose Misty here. I want to bring this up because, again, another tweet. I thought of Misty as soon as I saw another article. I saw this guy. Now, this is talk about World War. And Misty, I don't know if you made that up or not, but you said on my show, the death walrus. I mean, I'll never forget that. Yeah, this guy. And again, You can see him on all the channels. This John Bolton, this guy openly admitted that he had cooed countries. My God,
Yes.
he's a warmonger criminal, second maybe only to Henry Kissinger in this hemisphere, particularly. And he's rattling that saber, boy. He wants us to go to war with Iran, Misty.
Yeah, of course he does. That's what he wants us to go to war with anybody and everybody. This guy is an absolute raging psychopath.
Yes.
He's one of the worst human beings on planet Earth. And you're right. You will see him on every mainstream media network ad nauseum all the time on a regular basis. Hi, Suzanne. I'm never chill, homie. You know that. Suzanne is amazing. She is an Assange activist. She has helped me tremendously with a ton of events that we've done. She's in Boston. She does her own events. She's fantastic. I love her. Yeah, I'm never chill. You should know that by now. But yeah, John Bolton is a piece of shit, war propagandist, warmongering, death walrus. He is a horrible human being. And we really need to work on, we need to stop elevating the worst among us to positions of power. It's not a good idea.
All right. So we are at the top of the hour, and I am kind of imposing on Misty's timer. I'll give you a last word because, I mean, you're better at it than I am. Give us a close here, Misty, and we'll let you go for this time.
I mean, I don't really have much else to say. I think I kind of ranted about much of what I wanted to say about both Gaza and Assange. I mean, obviously, there's so much to say about both of those things, but I don't want to, continue on my crazy war walrus. I like that too. So, I mean, I would just encourage people to step away from the established system. It doesn't work for you. It's not designed to work for you. Quite the opposite. So a lot of people get angry at me when I speak so stringently against electoral politics, but it's not designed to get you anything. That's not how that works. So please do whatever you can to raise awareness about Julian Assange. There are the 2 court dates happening in February, February 20th and 21st in London. If you are anywhere near London, please get to the courthouse. We need a massive show. We need a massive presence of people there. So if you are able to make it there, please do. If you are not, there will be events taking place all across the globe. I always recommend that people follow my friend Alex on Twitter. It's Candles for Assange. It's the number 4. She does a great job of kind of collecting all of the global events and then tweeting them out from a central location. So it makes it easier for people to find one near you. But just do whatever you can. The biggest thing I think is sharing the information on social media is huge. Assange stuff is horribly suppressed. It is horribly suppressed. Algorithmically, they crush us. So helping us get around that is great. Having conversations in your real life, learning about the case for yourself. If you contact me on Twitter, I'm happy to send you a whole host of resources. But having those conversations in real life, and everybody can do something. Make a phone call, send an email, hang up a flyer, do anything. Everybody can do something, and every little bit helps. I realize you can feel a little bit helpless as a single person, but if every single person does one thing a day, I mean, that's huge. So just keep an eye out for events happening in February. There's going to be tons of them. Just help us get the word out as much as you can. And thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Oh man, that's great. It's a great way to end the year. I tell people sometimes I do shows that I got to do this. This is what I want to do at year's end here because 2023 mostly sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is fun for me having Misty Winston. This puts a good bow on my show for the year. Misty, you travel this life safe and well, and we'll talk again in 2024. Maybe we can be a little less cynical.
Free Assange in 2024.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yes.
All right, great.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon. And folks, if you like Misty Winston, if you like seeing her on the show, getting your comments and questions into her as well as I could anyway, watch the show regularly. And the best way to do that is to go to podcastbygeorge.com and sign up. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube very easily by clicking the badges, the icons on my website for those 2 platforms. Don't go searching around on YouTube. It'll be hard to find. Go to podcastbygeorge.com. And if you enjoy audio only type shows, you can get the iTunes location. Also, Spotify is on there, iHeartRadio app, Amazon Music, places like that. That's all on podcastbygeorge.com. Happy New Year. We'll talk again in 2024. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.